you for my tutorial for this month. So this is my straight out of camera image, and I'm going to take it and turn it into this image here. So you can see from the straight out of camera, I kind of warm things up, increase the canvas a little bit around her, and then add some snow in there, as well as a little bit of cloning and patching and things like that. So I'm going to show you how I do that. So let's get started. So this is my straight out of camera. First thing I'm going to do is flip the image around. So I'm going to go photo, flip horizontal, and that's just personal preference really, but a lot of times since we read left to right, I like my images to kind of be viewed left to right as well. So she's kind of looking to the right, which I like. So the next thing I'm going to do is add my own personal color preset here. All this is a base for me. I always go beyond this preset. It basically brings the highlights down a little, gives it a little contrast. I'm actually going to take that down a little more here. Drops the shadows a little, drops the blacks a little bit, and that's about it, and a little bit of vibrance. Now I'm going to warm things up. I'm kind of watching the background because I will do a radial filter over her, so I just want to see where I want the background to be. And I'm going to bring this down so that there's a little bit more green in there, just a touch. But obviously she is way too green now, so I'm going to grab a radial filter and put that right over her face here. And I am just going to bump the pinks on her quite a bit, and I'm going to bring the exposure down. She looks a little bit bright there, and then I'm going to warm her up too. Okay, so that's looking a lot better. Let me just check, kind of see where we are there. Not too bad. And I'm just gonna bring down a touch. Okay. Okay. So that's looking pretty good there. And then I'm gonna just, the lens I used was my 85 millimeter. And on this image, I do think I'm gonna do a profile correction. I don't always do one, but I am going to do one on this one here, and you can see that just kind of takes some of that vignetting away from the lens, because I will add in a little vignetting later, so I don't want to overdo it. So I'm going to take it out that one there. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with how that's looking so far. So let's go ahead and send it into Photoshop. Edit in Adobe Photoshop. And once we get into Photoshop, we're going to do our canvas adjustment to kind of increase the frame around her a little bit. A little bit of cloning and healing, especially on her face there. She face planted on the driveway the other day, so we need to clean that up. So yeah, and then we'll add our snow. So I'm going to zoom out a little while we play with the canvas. So I'm going to grab the crop tool here. I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm going to pull up from the corner just to increase the canvas around her here. I'm going to make sure that content aware is checked here and hit the check mark. And that's just going to fill in all this empty white space that was around with what the program thinks would look best compared to the image around that area, the pixels around it. So sometimes it does a pretty good job. You can see here some replication in the content aware. So I'm just going to grab my clone tool, and I'm going to make it a little bit smaller here, and we're just going to fill in some of those spots. And I'm going to bump my opacity somehow. That was down from the last time I used it there. Let's see. Looking pretty good now. Okay, so I'm happy with how that's looking. So then let's go ahead and we're going to just zoom in and kind of fix some of the spots on her face here. So I'm just going to grab my healing brush, and that's pretty small there. So we're going to make it a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to see how it does if I just do a little bit of the healing brush on these spots. She had a pretty good bruise there too. And then I'm going to zoom in a little more. She's got some crusties and stuff here, so let's grab my healing brush and just kind of make it a little smaller, clean up a little bit of that stuff. You can see the snowflake in her hair, which is nice. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. I'll go a little bigger and see if we can just increase some of that. There, just like that. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and zoom out here. And I'm going to do a little more with her face and eye sharpening and stuff in Lightroom. I like to do that in Lightroom. So I'm going to do that in there in a little bit. So, okay, so far so good. I'm liking we've adjusted the canvas, kind of cleaned up her face a little bit there. Let's go ahead. I'm going to just add a little bit of, or an overlay to this to kind of give it a little bit of warmth. So I'm going to go into my overlays and I'm going to go down here to my textures, and let's see, which one do I want to add today? I really like, these are from, the ones I like are from Jessica Drazen. I like Mysteries a lot. I like Halo a lot. And I think for this one, I'm going to go ahead and do Mysteries. So I'm just going to drag that on there. And I'm going to select Soft Light to kind of give it a little bit of warmth. That's obviously too strong, so we're going to bring that down. And it's really darkened up the edge here, so I'm going to actually hold down my Shift key and just expand that out a little bit there. And then I'm going to hit check. And I can adjust the opacity more here once we take a look at it. Let's see. I kind of like how that's looking. It's a little strong still, though, so I'm going to bring it down even a little more. Okay, that's pretty good. So then I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and we want to make sure we're up above 100, and that will take the texture out. So we'll go ahead and do that. All right, so let's take a look at that again. Okay, I'm liking how that's looking, so I'm just going to go Layer, Flatten Image, and that's just personal preference to flatten things out. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. This spot of bokeh right above her is kind of bothering me. So I'm going to just clone that out. So I'm just going to try to work with the clone tool around here and see if I can kind of clone that area out a little bit. So as we get close to her hat here, I don't want to mess too much. I like kind of how the light's shining in there. So what I'm going to do is just decrease the opacity down and make my brush a little smaller. And I'm just going to continue to do that right over here by her ears. Okay, let's zoom out and then kind of see how that looks. Looks pretty good to me. Okay. Liking how that's looking. So let's go ahead and go back, excuse me, to my overlays, and I'm going to go into my snow, and I'm just going to grab some snow flurries and drag those on there. And we'll extend that out there a little bit. And then for the snow flurries, I'm going to pick screen, and that is going to just show the white part and the black will disappear. So I like how that looks. So I'm going to hit the check mark here. Now I don't love where some of these are falling on her. It was snowing lightly, excuse me, that day. So there was a little snow on her hat and all of that, but this definitely adds to the image by adding a little more snow. But I don't love where some of them are falling. So I'm just going to grab a layer mask here. It's a white layer mask. I want a black brush. So I'm going to select a black brush. I'm going to go a little bit larger here, and I'm just going to remove a few of those that are kind of falling in spots where I don't want them, like on her eyes and a little bit there on her chin. I don't mind them on her dress and stuff because it was snowing. So, but the other thing I see is these flakes are a little bit harsh. I kind of want it to have a softer look, so I'm just going to add a blur to those too. Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm just going to bring that way down here. Let's see. I'm gonna go right about there and hit OK. So you can kind of see before we added them and after. So it just adds a little something extra to the image. So I'm gonna go layer, flatten the image, and I'm gonna go file, and I think that's all I'm gonna do in Photoshop here. So I'm gonna go file, save. Sorry about that beeping. And it's gonna send it back into Lightroom here. So this, remember, this one here was our, oop, not that one. This was our Lightroom edit. So now here we have our Photoshop edit. So I'm gonna go ahead and zoom in on her eyes, and I'm gonna take a brush and grab a clarity brush. I'm gonna keep it up around 25 or so, and I'm gonna add a little exposure. So I'm gonna go about there. So make the brush nice and small, and I'm just gonna brush it on her eyes here. Just right over, trying to avoid any of the lines. I'm going to actually add a little sharpness too. Let's go up to about 15 or so. So that looks pretty good. Sharpened up her eyes a little bit so you can kind of see the difference there. Just adds a little something. I do want to brighten up the browns in her eyes, the color, so I'm just going to do exposure and bump that exposure a little bit and make my brush even smaller, and I'm just going to go over the browns of her eyes there just to kind of make them pop a little more. There we go. And then I want her lashes to jump out a little more, so I'm going to do another clarity brush, and I'm going to add a little bit of darkness to them, or take the exposure down a little. I'm just going to brush it nice and easy right over her lashes, and you can see it just kind of adds to that, the depth there. All right, so I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. Overall, I do still see a little bit of green, too much green in the image, so I'm just going to bump the magenta a little to tone that down. And it does affect her skin, so I'm going to do one more radial filter here over her, right over her face there. And I'm just going to do exposure, and I'm going to bring that exposure down again just a little bit, and then give her a little bit more warmth on her skin. Okay, let's just check her coloring there. All right, so that's looking pretty good. Okay. So the last thing I'm going to do is just zoom in a little bit, and actually I'm just going to do it from here, and I'm going to grab the texture brush. I just want that fur to really pop, so I'm just going to grab texture and bump that up to about 20 or so, and then add a little clarity and just rub that over the fur in the hat here, just to make that really stand out. All right. One more thing I'm going to do here. The last thing I'm going to do is kind of zoom in. You can see kind of a pretty light at the top of the ears here. So I'm just going to take an exposure brush and bring it just a little bit up, and then highlights just a little up as well. And then I'm just going to rub that right along the top. I might even go a little more with this, right along the top of the fur where you see right about there. So you can see the brushes we did in here. Oops, sorry. Brush. Just flip those on and off. So pretty subtle, but if you watch the hat, we really kind of helped make the contrast pop a little bit there. So I like how that looks. Okay, so that is how I would edit that image. So if you have any questions about anything, let me know. If not, have a good day. Thanks for watching.